Welcome to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast, where we talk to IT marketing leaders about how to drive more sales. Hosted by Carlos Corredor, founder of Condor, an Inc. 5000 company and one of the fastest growing IT marketing agencies in the US.
3, 2, 1, 0.
This episode is brought to you by Condor, a digital marketing agency for mid-market B2B and tech services companies. Most B2B marketing teams struggle to drive sales, overwhelmed by long sales cycles and an elusive audience. Condor helps you measure and generate a qualified pipeline, make the most with your budget, and be recognized as a revenue driver and not just a cost center. You can learn more at condoragency.com. Today, we welcome Tanner Stolte, who is the Senior Customer Success Manager at LinkedIn in the Enterprise Tech team. Before LinkedIn, he had more than 10 years in the agency B2B world. So we're really excited to discuss all things LinkedIn with him today. So welcome.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, Carlos. Excited to be here and looking forward to diving in on a little B2B tech talk.
Yeah. And, we're talking for the podcast LinkedIn. I think everyone sees the potential. Nobody questions the potential in LinkedIn, but a lot of people see it as expensive, right? I guess it's relative depending on what you are what you think you're paying for. If you're paying for impressions, then it's definitely expensive. If you're paying for good leads, probably, depending on how you're doing things, hopefully not so. And that's exactly what we're gonna get to. But like, why don't I'm sure you've heard this a lot. What's your take on this conception?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a pretty common take that we hear from clients, prior to getting into or buying ad space on LinkedIn. And essentially, what I encourage folks to do if they're planning strategy around LinkedIn is take a look at their other channels first and try and calculate a cost per MQL or marketing qualified lead. Oftentimes, what we'll see on LinkedIn is when you start running the metrics down funnel, not just the cost per lead on the front end, but cost per good lead or cost per closed deal, the numbers start working out in LinkedIn's favor when you look down funnel. If you look at other platforms that say may drive cheaper leads on the front end, but only 20% of them are really a match or fit for your services, the cost per MQL is much higher. And so when we take a look at a platform like LinkedIn, those down funnel metrics tend to balance themselves out when we're looking at quality, closed won, opportunities created, things like that. Cost definitely is a little more. You can usually expect to pay, 3 to 4 times more on the front end on LinkedIn if you're looking at cost per lead or cost per download, whatever it may be. But when we take a look at those down funnel metrics, that's when things sort of work themselves out and start to lean in LinkedIn's favor.
And compared to Google Ads, how I explain it to our clients is Google Ads is great for intent because obviously it's based on search, but you don't control who searches for that, right? So if you use the acronym of a BANT lead, so a lead who has budget, authority, need, and timing, Google Ads is great for need and timing, but not great for budget and authority. And LinkedIn is exactly the opposite, right? So you can reach out to people with budget and authority just because of the targeting capabilities, obviously, but not necessarily, with intent and timing. Is that a fair conclusion? And how do you think people can maneuver that, or is LinkedIn thinking about, or how does LinkedIn recommend, targeting also for intent and need?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's a couple things we can touch on when it comes to, comparing and contrasting Google and LinkedIn's capabilities. If you are running Google ads, to your point, it's hard to dictate quality. So what a lot of advertisers like to do is retarget their Google Ads pages with LinkedIn ads and use the LinkedIn filters to get to that quality. So anyone that visits the Google page, like you said, you can't control who searches for that term, but within LinkedIn, we can capture the traffic on that page and then filter down to, C-suite or decision makers, whatever it may be, and retarget the appropriate people within the LinkedIn platform. So that's one sort of strategy we see working well in accounts across LinkedIn at the moment. And then in terms of intent, LinkedIn does offer intent signals within the advertising platform. So you can search for members based on content they're consuming or clicking on, such as like softwares, or maybe they're interested in a certain technology type, or they're getting educated in HR, whatever it may be. So there are some intent signals within LinkedIn that you can leverage and layer on top of.
Mhm.
And a lot of times Google, to your point, folks have that high intent and they're sort of already at the bottom of the funnel when they're searching for a solution in Google. But we know from the research on the platform that about 80% of the decision-making process before someone goes to book a demo or buy a product happens sort of in the background. They're consuming content, reading posts, and where LinkedIn really shines is influencing those folks before they get to the Google search bar.
Mhm.
Usually you'll find that closed won deals. I think the stat is like 74% of closed won deals go with the provider who provided them with a useful piece of content or something informational in the beginning of their journey. So you kind of want to
Mhm.
be there before someone goes to search for something, and that's where LinkedIn really shines. You can get in front of the right people, but then also do a little retargeting on the back
Mhm.
end.
Yeah, that's a common mistake, although natural and understandable, which is that mid-market companies without enterprise budget, right? They
Mhm.
go all in on bottom of the funnel. Obviously, that's when they can squeeze, as many um, short-term MQLs and SQLs.
Absolutely.
But eventually, you need to build your brand, and then yeah, as you mentioned, right? If somebody's searching for the solution, a lot of times they already have a decision. Yeah, they've already made the decision, right? But LinkedIn is great in you being top of mind in
Mhm.
your niche, in your industry for your products and services. So when people then start looking into things, they have you. Even they already know the name of your company and look for it organically on Google, whatever it might be. Um, let's get into common mistakes that companies make when trying to um, yeah, go heavy on LinkedIn. When they try to, okay, let's put in what's a significant budget for a mid-market company, and that could be, 20K a month to, I don't know, 200K a month, right? Um, what do they usually get wrong and scares them right away?
Sure. So to sort of piggyback off of your previous point about folks often focusing on bottom of funnel for the short-term wins, that's usually a primary mistake I see in a lot of accounts when they're getting started, because they want to capture leads, they want to feed the sales team, they want to, add more contacts to the CRM to nurture, and lead capture absolutely has a place. I'm a big lead generation guy myself. I love direct response advertising in general, but it has its place. Typically on LinkedIn, you'll see this sort of 95-5 rule be talked about quite a lot. And essentially, what that is a research piece from the B2B Institute that shows that only 5% of your market is in a buying decision right now or in the place to purchase a product or a solution. And that other 95% is out of market or in a research phase, and they're not there yet. And so a lot of marketers fight over that 5% of the market that's in a buying state right now, and they ignore the 95%. And so a lot of times what we recommend on the platform is a nice, healthy full funnel strategy. So you want a little branding and awareness on the top that lets people know sort of who you are, what you stand for, your top taglines, if you will. Some middle of funnel with content. I think the content is the biggest opportunity for companies advertising on LinkedIn, again, because we know that buyers who eventually shift into that 5% buying phase, they are often influenced by the content strategy early on. And that content strategy can take 6 months to a year before that person moves in market. But a lot of times, if we don't have that content in place, we're not staying in front of them, we're not delivering value, and you don't make it onto that mental shortlist that consumers sort of put together when they're thinking about solutions. Let's say you're, a CRM company, for example, and a mid-market VP reaches out to his marketing team and says, "Hey, we need a new CRM. Like, what do you guys think? What do you see out there?" And he's sort of polling the team. The people that are going to come to top of mind are the ones who had, a helpful piece of content that someone read. They have posts that are constantly going across the news feed. So it's really important to sort of invest in full funnel from the beginning to play the short game and the long game at the same time.
What approximate split do you recommend between the two?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, ideally, you're leaning 50-50 in the mix. If you can do sort of branding and your content as 50%, and then some lead capture bottom of funnel as your other 50%, that's a really nice blend. I'll give you a marketer's favorite answer, though. It depends on, who your target market is, how much budget you have, what sort of resource support and resources your company has. A common mistake that I see as well is that companies will run lead gen, but they don't have the sales team support behind it to really extract the value. They know they should be generating leads, and maybe they're just going into the CRM and not getting nurtured, or they're not getting follow-up or phone calls from the SDR. So if you have a sales team to support lead generation, or an ABM team, you can maybe weight your budget in that direction a little more to pick up some of those more short-term wins, but you definitely don't want to ignore the branding and content phase of the funnel as well. So 50-50 is a good place to start. 60-40 towards lead gen, maybe if you have a sales team, but if maybe you don't have sales team support, or you're going towards more enterprise accounts that have a longer sales cycle, you can weight more in the direction of content. So that's generally what I recommend to start.
And same audience, right? The audience is the same. Simply, they're gonna see sometimes, content that is ungated, educational, and then also sometimes maybe pushing more for a consultation or a lead magnet that is gated. Correct?
Absolutely. I think once you, especially in the top of funnel, that branding and awareness, the content, those are your cold audiences that don't really know you very well. You're trying to educate them, keep the brand in front of them, get them to consume your pieces with very low friction. Either they're just reading the post in the feed, or maybe they're going to an ungated piece as well. And then as you start getting down towards like lead capture, that can still go to cold, but does really well for retargeting, maybe your website traffic or someone who did read one of the prior blogs. And then as you're at very bottom of funnel and you're looking at like request for demo or start a trial, that really should be to retargeting to start, because those people are brand familiar. They've read your content or consumed some of your assets already. You can test bottom of funnel to cold. Occasionally it works if there's a good product market fit that just naturally entices people to sign up for a software service or something along those lines. But typically, if we're looking at demo ads or start a trial or something very bottom, that's best served for retargeting. It's where the numbers are gonna make the most sense.
And how about something that is top funnel, but it could be top funnel, so very educational, but gated versus ungated for a cold audience? Any recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see people in the LinkedIn newsfeed debate this back and forth quite a bit, the gated versus ungated. And, I think both have their place. Again, if you have a sales team who can support lead generation, or you have good long-term nurture email campaigns, gated materials that provide true value to a member on LinkedIn are wonderful. PDFs, guides, how-tos, checklists, what have you. Those are great, and they add them to your CRM CRM and you can nurture them for the long term. Once you own a contact record, then you don't have to, pay to remarket to them again. You can reach out to them in all the different channels from there. But at the same time, if we're looking at top of funnel and our primary goal is just content consumption, low friction, we want to stay memorable in the consumer's minds, then ungated is perfect. So I think it circles back to what is your overarching strategy when you get onto LinkedIn. And then you can sort of pick and choose what should be gated, or what, we're just going to use top of funnel to get people to the website, brand familiar, reading our core, pillar pieces of content. So a lot of times like blogs and things like that are ungated. But if you have a nice designed piece like a PDF or something or a white paper that, folks might enjoy, that's really well served for a gated piece of material.
So let's so focusing on still top funnel and a cold audience. What type of content have you seen works better? Like, does it make a difference? I see a lot of people, for example, they spend weeks and a lot of hours from their expert teams creating a PDF that is 20 pages long, and a lot of times a lead magnet that is simply like a 5-point checklist of 1 page, performs better. But obviously, you want the person to download it and see the value. So there's a balance there. But like, any recommendation in terms of what the length of the content piece and even the format, how interactive is it, etc.?
Sure. I don't want to keep saying it depends, because again, that's a default marketer's answer. But in general, I'd say if the piece provides genuine value, like I've seen really nice research pieces that are 15, 20, 30 pages long, and these companies have surveyed 1,300 business owners to get this data. And that length is sort of validated by the content inside of it, then a long piece is perfectly fine. And typically, a consumer has no idea how long the piece is going to be when they originally download it. Maybe if you're using document ads and it says like, hey, there's 5 more pages to this, download now, they would get some idea. But typically, if a PDF is behind a lead form, they don't know if it's 1 page or 100. What's really going to drive action for them is good copywriting on top that speaks to a pain point of the consumer, and then also just good graphics and media paired with that to get them to stop scrolling and hover over the ad and take the time to read what the ad's about and actually download it. I think that pain-based messaging is something that often gets missed in advertising as well. It's a core fundamental of any good ad campaign, but I think that makes the difference when it comes to the ads that do and don't get downloaded.
And let's say you are the VP of a marketing team in a B2B services company, and you have a writer full time, right? And he reports into you, and you are organizing the year and the content strategy, right? How many content pieces would you ask him to put out? And let's say, I don't know, well, it's 12 months. Let's say he's able to do, well, obviously it depends, right? But in percentage wise, right? Why would you tell him to do like white papers versus one pagers versus maybe, somewhere in between,
Absolutely. If I'm a VP planning my LinkedIn content strategy for the year, let's say, typically what you want is we sort of have this concept at LinkedIn called hum, sing, and shout. So hum is like your always on content, which is going to be your core, I'd say, pillars. So these are 4 to 5 pieces of content that are deep, probably 1,700 words plus, that live on the website that speak to your core demographics, like pain points that always exist. So like, do you need more leads? Why are leads not converting? How to increase sales? So these are like pillar pieces that will just always be on in the background in your ad account that constantly speak to those pain points. Then the ones that are sing are one-off pieces that might speak to industry trends or hot topics that are going on at the moment that you might promote with a little extra budget, but not throughout the whole year. So maybe have another 4 to 5 pieces like that. And then the shout portion of the content strategy is one-off stuff for, say, like an event or a webinar that you're doing. So you'll have specific content around that topic that you'll promote heavily, maybe with some extra budget, and then it turns off when the event is over. So it's kind of a three-layer content strategy that seems to work well on LinkedIn, with your always on, some intermittent, promotions, and then some really big promos around important stuff throughout the year. So if you're looking at how much content do you need to put out, I'd say 4 to 5 key pieces that you're always going to promote, and then probably monthly you're looking at like 1 or 2 specialty pieces. Again, if you have someone doing that full time.
Okay. I like hum, sing, and shout way of seeing it. How about for measurement? Obviously, for retargeting, bottom of the funnel. Yeah, you wanna see how many not only conversions or early leads, but eventually MQLs and SQLs. But especially for the top funnel, right? What metrics do you recommend using?
Yeah, on the top end of your funnel, before we're looking downstream at quality and deals created and things of that nature, obviously we're looking at cost per clicks, we're looking at CPMs and cost per lead. Those are going to be your core pieces to start, usually on LinkedIn. Again, depending on your audience, if you're targeting Fortune 500 CEOs, it's going to be more expensive to get them to click versus small business owners where there's a lot more of that inventory on the platform. So typically, I mean, $5 to $15 is a pretty average cost per click on LinkedIn, again, skewing higher for more premium audiences. If you're looking at CPMs, $30 to $60 is pretty average for a mid-size audience. And then cost per lead really is variable depending on what you're promoting and how big your lead form is and things like that. But you can pay 30 to $100 on average per lead, 100 to 250 for premium leads. Again, if you're like targeting Fortune 500 CEOs or VPs, those are going to cost more. So that's top line, baseline, what you're looking for. Outside of that, dwell time is a nice metric to look at as well. So LinkedIn will show us how long someone hovers over your ad. And it's really interesting. I was looking at some comparative stats the other day of like ads that worked versus ads that weren't working in an account. And the hover time difference was 1 second between the winners and the losers. And it's really interesting to think that as consumers are going through the news feed, it's a 1 second split difference between choosing to read your ad or keep moving. So that's why like the creative and the visual is such an important piece of the puzzle, because without that, we don't get the scroll stop and you don't win that lead, or you don't get that extra 1 second of read time that it takes for someone to make a decision.
Yeah. And how about, for example, I like the dwell time. I think everybody is used to cost per clicks, and then obviously if those are getting people to your website, then those are visits. But yeah, dwell is a good one that is probably underused. How about, for example, for videos or for not non-video engagement, right? Because you need them to engage to put them on a remarketing audience, correct? And two, like on videos, time watched. How about those two?
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously LinkedIn, we're seeing a big influx of video content, especially in vertical format videos as well. But from an advertising standpoint, I love a video views campaign somewhere in the top of the funnel. It's a great way to a low friction, no need to leave the platform way to get people introduced to your product, your testimonials from your clients, things like that. Depending on the length of the video, let's say it's just a minute long. Usually I want to capture or retarget 50% or more of my views. At least someone hung out on the video for 30 seconds, which compared to what the dwell time on an average ad is 3 to 4 seconds. So 30 seconds, while it sounds very short, is quite a lot of time. So at least someone consumed a bit of the material. I have seen clients use let's say they had a clip from the news or a longer piece of content that's 4 to 5 minutes long, I'll remarket at 25% or more in that instance, because we're still getting, you know, a minute or more of view time, which shows a decent amount of intent when you're talking about how long someone hangs out on an ad. So I'm a big fan of video ads for retargeting from that instance, and it's relatively cheap to build a retargeting pool using video in the top of the funnel, especially if you use LinkedIn's video views objective inside of the ad platform.
And can you build a retargeting off of dwell metrics or no?
Not at the moment that I'm aware of. I don't think dwell time has a specific metric, but any engagement with an ad, whether it's clicks or they actually opened a lead form, you can capture any of that right now.
Or if he liked or applauses or whatever,
Reaction,
or shares,
share. Yep. You got it.
comment.
Any of
Yeah.
that they'll be put in. And for the video views, they just have to view it. They don't actually have to click anything. As long as the video runs, it will capture them. So that's one of the advantages to video views as well.
And in terms of measurement, I'll quickly go over what has been the standard way of measuring things, not only on LinkedIn, but even like on Facebook and Google Ads. Obviously, you can see things in the platform. You see cost per clicks and engagement metrics and cost per leads. Obviously, then to follow up on that lead, that's usually done in your CRM, where you're capturing from the UTM parameters that the person is coming from LinkedIn. You can even capture the tactic, the campaign, the creative, etc. So that's like the traditional way that's been happening for years. How is that evolving? And I understand now, you can bring things back to LinkedIn for lead quality, so that you can use the algorithm can use that to you're not only measuring that, but you can actually use that for the algorithm to optimize. And what else is happening, right? Like what else is in the roadmap for, let's say, allowing you to gather first party data and do your own measurement and potentially retargeting strategies, or like what's coming up on the measurement side?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So to sort of roll off what you were talking about, pushing back quality leads. So some accounts may see this already, but you can start to optimize around MQLs. So we're seeing that roll out on some accounts now, and you can create a conversion event in LinkedIn around an MQL and use Zapier or a third-party tool to push that data from your CRM back to that conversion event to help optimization. Say, hey, LinkedIn, these people are really who fit our ICP. Let's try and target around this ICP a little more. And you can tie that conversion event to whatever campaign you're running. So that's a cool feature that's sort of ramping up. And I think roadmap wise, you'll start to see more features rolling out around MQL as that feature becomes more robust. I believe that's just relatively new in some accounts as of like the last month or so. But broadly speaking, in terms of measurement and attribution, this is where you see the LinkedIn product team making a lot of investments last year and into this year with revenue attribution report. So inside of LinkedIn's Business Manager, there's a tool called Revenue Attribution Report, and clients can sync their Salesforce data or their HubSpot data directly with LinkedIn, and LinkedIn will look for closed-won opportunities inside of your system and match them to ads that they clicked on, and it can now show and attribute which ads help drive those revenue points. So whether it's based on impression or based on clicks, you can visualize the revenue attribution of your ad campaigns. Like you mentioned before, you could kind of do this manually if you were able to track, some UTMs or some parameters within HubSpot from a lead form fill. But I think, as we both know, that the user journey isn't linear anymore. Everyone wants people to click an ad, book a demo, make a purchase, and it just doesn't really happen like that. They read a post, they share it with a friend, then they read a blog article 2 months later. And especially if you're running content heavy campaigns, we know content has an effect on the marketing funnel, but often it's hard. It doesn't get last click attribution. There's really not rarely is there a direct conversion tied to content because someone might come back 6 months later and Google search you after reading that blog a few months ago. So with the revenue attribution report, it closes that gap in reporting, and it shows you, hey, someone did click this blog article, 2 months back, and they just turned into closed won revenue for you for 10K, 100K, whatever it is. So revenue attribution report's really cool, and there's some more features coming out in terms of attribution later, I want to say this year around that. So they're continuing to build upon revenue attribution report. And then for extra data points, Conversion API is a really cool tool that we're encouraging folks to roll into their accounts more. So again, this uses Zapier to push really any data point that you want back to your campaigns. And what it lets you do is, like, let's say you want to track open opportunities, MQLs, or closed won deals. If you're not using revenue attribution report, you can look for a signal in Zapier for it to listen for any event that you're thinking of. And once that event happens and triggers, it gets pushed back into your LinkedIn account and tracked as a conversion. So you can tie that conversion to all of your campaigns, and at the end of the month, just do a campaign export and say which of these have a conversion event tied to them for open deals, let's say. Not just a lead, but an open deal. And you can kind of start to grade your campaigns on which ones are creating open opportunities, or at least influencing open opportunities. So I really recommend Conversion API. That's been getting a lot more support, and it's getting a lot more robust in terms of integrations. So folks should be able to see that in like the sidebar signals and measurements area in their ad campaign. And it's a really cool tool to import any data point that you can think of, really.
Nice. And how about shifting now from measurement back to content type, or at least where to distribute the content from? And I'm referring to where, the thought leader ads, which is essentially paid ads from from individual accounts, because it's professional, obviously, but versus doing it from the company page, right? And I like seeing content from a face and from a person. Obviously it depends, as you mentioned, right? But in general, I enjoy it more. I trust it more. I'm more willing to reply or add a comment or follow. In general, when it's coming from a person and not from a company, I think most people are like me, but I don't know. Like, what are your thoughts on advice on, for example, from from your total budget, how much should be spending from your company, and then from your experts on the topics?
Absolutely. Your thought leaders ads are definitely a hot topic, and probably one of the top ad formats right now, getting a lot of traction. Because as you mentioned, people trust people. While it's business to business, it's always person to person at the end of the day. And the ads look natural in the news feed. Folks are willing to engage with them more. Typically, if you're looking at engagement rates on thought leader ads, they can be anywhere from 5 to 15% click-through rate. Now, click-through counts like someone reading see more or playing the video. Click can be any type of click, not necessarily just on a link to your website. But in general, very high engagement rates on thought leader ads, and they do really well almost in any portion of the funnel that you're looking towards. Top of funnel for education or awareness, middle of funnel for content consumption, they can push to a blog, or bottom of funnel for like client testimonials and things of that nature. So typically, if someone's going to engage in thought leader ads, we like to see them come from someone in the C-suite or a leader in the organization. And if they already have a good organic following on LinkedIn and they post regularly, you can sort of pick content pieces that already had good natural organic engagement, and then push those into a paid setting using thought leader ads, and they do really well for clients. So I highly recommend, if folks aren't already using thought leader ads, to sort of test them out. And it's a really great way to build a remarketing audience as well, because the engagement is so high, and it looks so natural to the newsfeed.
And in terms of a recommended split between thought leaders and company ads?
Yeah, typically, I mean, for right now, I primarily see people just doing, personal pages for the most part. I don't see a lot of boosted content specifically from the company page for like a thought leader specifically. It's mainly intended for individual users. You're going to use your company page for your traditional campaigns, like your content, your gated lead gen materials, things like that. But when it comes to like boosting individual posts, that's always going to be from the individual level.
And let's say, if I'm, as a company, if I'm spending, I don't know, $1 million on LinkedIn this year, how much do you recommend spending it in thought leader ads, or boosting content via thought leaders versus campaigns from the company page?
Absolutely. So if you're planning on spending $1 million a year, the sky's the limit. You can do full funnel, and I
That's true. Maybe, okay, let's say
yeah.
100K.
Sure, and 100K can still be, healthy. You're looking at about, $10,000 a month in spend, and usually around 10K is when I start recommending people getting into full funnel. But if I'm around 10K a month or something like that, I'm gonna have thought leader in definitely the top of the funnel. So, if we're saying we're trying to do a 50-50 split overall, maybe that's, 20 to 25% is top of funnel content. And from there, I'm going to capture retargeting audiences from that. And then I'm probably also going to use them in bottom of funnel for like social proof. So let's say you're a CEO or a VP and you did a customer interview or a testimonial, or you guys won an award for something and you posted about it. It's nice to use those pieces in bottom of funnel as social proof as well, to retarget those who've already engaged with your content, to say like, hey, we're thought leaders, we're authorities in the space, we can be trusted, because in a digital age, building trust is a really important
Mhm.
piece of the puzzle as well. So I like them in both top and bottom of funnel for the most part, and then like my content and gated material in the middle is going to be from the company page.
Interesting. And so let's say it's with that budget, it's a 50-50 split between thought leaders and company page in the
Um,
in along the different parts of the funnel, but let's say roughly.
Sure. I typically, in most accounts, I see it a lot smaller than that. Typically, it might be 10% of spend, specifically to individual contributors' posts being boosted in the
Okay.
mix. A lot of it is leaning towards the company page in the account, because that's really where you want to build the brand around what someone's going to search when they finally come into that buying phase.
Yeah.
They're in that 5%. So it is still heavily weighted towards company pages in a lot of accounts, but they're working in thought leader ads into almost every
Hmm.
stage of the game.
Hmm. Gotcha. Um, what other common errors, do people make when, uh, yeah, managing a healthy budget on LinkedIn, or when they're starting and they're trying to start ramping things up, and then get frustrated? Like, what are, the most common errors?
Sure, absolutely. So, I think when I look at marketing campaigns on LinkedIn, it all starts with strategy at the high level. I think the common misstep is just to come in and start running ads with no plan, and you need a plan in the beginning on, the classics. Who are we going to target? What is their pains? What's the message going to be? And what's creative that's going to resonate with them? To get them to stop scrolling. And then after that, you kind of have the technical setup as well. Like you're getting into Campaign Manager, you're starting to pick your audiences, you're starting to pick your exclusions. And there's some pitfalls folks can run into in the technical setup. You can use and or statements to refine and filter. So a lot of times we'll see folks over refine and create too small of an audience. Usually, if you're under 50K for a cold audience, that's a little too small. But if you're over 1 million for a cold audience, that's a little too big. So the sweet spot's kind of like 50K to 600 when it comes to audience size. So making sure your filters are appropriately set, and then also setting your exclusions as well. No algorithm is perfect on any social network. So using exclusions at the bottom to, maybe you don't want students or interns or what have you. A lot of times I see folks leave off exclusions, and that can help just make sure you're getting in front of the right ICP, keeps the algorithm in line. And then I'd say attribution is the next, big hurdle for folks to get over, using that conversion API, setting up the revenue attribution report, and deciding before you even run the campaign, how are we going to measure the results and use those results to optimize and improve what we're doing. Run this for 3 months, do a review. Are we going to use UTMs? Do we even use UTMs now? Are we going to have sales teams follow up with these leads? Or are they just going to go into email nurture? And sort of dictating what those KPIs are going to be before we even start running the campaign. So you're not just throwing darts at the board and trying to figure out what's working and what's not. You have a clear path on how we're going to measure and how we're going to scale over time. And I think those sort of three areas, the pre-planning, the technical setup, and the attribution, are really what folks need to pay attention to, when they're getting into LinkedIn.
Hmm. Yeah, especially I think there's an you said it also at the beginning of the episode about not with these words, but I'm saying like setting expectations. I think the words that you used was look at your current cost per lead, for example, right? Because a lot of times then they launch a LinkedIn ads campaign, but the expectation is to have the same cost per click as Google or as close to it as possible, right? And if that's your expectation, you're going to be frustrated from the start and from until the finish, right? So I think that's a good point of, first of all, understanding what are the ranges and simply knowing the game that you're getting into, understanding the sport, right? It's a different sport than what you've been playing. So understanding the rules of this sport, I think it's important. How about from a format and creative standpoint, right? Any common errors there?
Sure. So, like top formats that are working right now across accounts in terms of static imagery, Square Image does really well. Square and Vertical are the two highest click-through rates at the moment. The, older horizontal format still works in some settings, but the campaigns I see working the best are taking advantage of Square for the most part, primarily because it does a really nice job, especially on mobile, taking up the news feed as folks are scrolling through, and same for vertical formatting too. It takes up more of that news feed, gets you to stop scrolling a little bit more. So I see the highest dwell times on Square creatives, and when you're looking at like color palettes and things like that, I think a lot of times companies get stuck with their corporate color palettes, and things can kind of blend into LinkedIn. If you think of the LinkedIn newsfeed, it's a lot of grays, whites, blues, maybe tans, like corporate tones that don't pop out as much. And so if you have some creative liberties with your color palette and you are able to put some colors in there that stand out against some more of those dull tones, that's a really great way to get things to pop and get more dwell time on the ad. So I think a good example is if you scroll through your news feed, you'll see folks like background images. Some of them have like pink or like a neon blue or something like that. Think of that same sort of concept when you're creating ads. Those stand out and get people to stop for that extra 1 second that you need for them to consume the ad, actually make a decision. So if you have the creative liberty to be bold with the colors, I'd say go for it.
And how about video? Any common mistakes on video? Too long, too short, too polished? I don't know. Like,
The too polish is a great call out. What's interesting is like UGC or user generated content is what folks are used to seeing. Folks are used to seeing, people with their hand in front of them, like this, shooting a quick casual selfie off of the cell phone, and those do really well. You see them right now in the vertical formats in the LinkedIn video feed, and folks are used to non-polished videos. So I think a lot of times folks can overthink it when they're thinking of how well or what kind of content quality you need to drive impact. But realistically, if you can get your CEO just to shoot something quick at the desk with a cell phone, it can do really well. And in terms of length, 30 to 60 seconds is probably the most common. Again, we're kind of fighting for attention at the end of the day, whether it's in organic content or paid. So 30 to 60 seconds is a pretty common format that folks are used to now, of course, from TikTok and YouTube Shorts and things of that nature. For down funnel, if you're retargeting to people who have already consumed your blogs or they've been in your funnels for a while, longer format works really well. I have clients with case studies that are 4 to 5 minutes long where they go interview a client of theirs and they're walking through the solution, the impact it had, some of the particular numbers that they did from implementing their solution. We'll get folks watching a 4 to 6 minute long video all day long, but they've already been engaging with our content. That's not something I'm going to serve to them in the very top of the funnel cold layer. So I'd say the warmer someone is, the longer the video can be. But in general, for basic content consumption, 30 to 60 seconds is fine.
For video, what do you recommend, like in terms of putting in time, right, and making a piece of content? It could be video, or it could, well, I guess video makes more sense for this question. In the writer or the content person, putting more time into creating a very interesting topic, and insights, or creating the first topic that comes to mind and then making a lot of variations at the end of 10 different tiles of test and 3 different background colors, like how or is it both, right? But where would you encourage your content person to lean and spend more time, like, improving the ingredients or the final cherry of the cake, and the final color of the happy birthday letters?
Sure, yeah. I think that comes down to your personal content strategy. So I've seen folks go one of two ways. Either they will do a video first strategy where they'll write scripts, they'll come up with a good meaty piece of content. Maybe it's even a podcast like this, and they'll do a core piece that's 20 to 30 minutes long. That's really well scripted, and then they chunk that into little bits and pieces and clips, and create posts from that, create blogs from each of those clips, maybe on the different subjects, like like we've covered today. Break each one of those into a post or into another blog article, and they will use video as the top piece of content and then break it into clips and then break that into blogs and sort of trickle down the content strategy from there. But when I talk to my friends on LinkedIn who are individual contributors, they run their own firms. A lot of what they do is off the cuff. They might not write a script at all, and they just say, here's an interesting topic that came up in a meeting. Grab the phone and shoot a quick 30-second clip on thoughts on that topic, and it does really well, 50 to 100 likes, no problem. So it can really go one of two ways. You can do a really nice polished production plan. I think at the company level, that's important just to know where you're going to go for the month, the quarter, the year. But when it comes to an individual contributor, just picking up the phone and shooting something casual does just fine. So people are really used to seeing that formatting. Now, if you're going to talk video, like CTV is a big conversation right now at LinkedIn, doing programmatic ads across, smart TV, using LinkedIn's filtering capabilities. That's going to probably be more of a polished video, more of an actual production piece that you want to use in a setting like that. I don't see a lot of user-generated content, selfie cell phone video going into that format, primarily because you still need to go to the traditional horizontal formatting for CTV. But in general, in the news feed, straight off the cell phone is just fine.
Yeah, about the new feature of essentially having like a TikTok like or Instagram Reels like interface, and if companies are trying to appear there, like, do you have any recommendation on what format to use, or because that you don't control being featured there, right? You put it on your feed and then hope for the best, but should you then at least increase your chances by using a vertical format, or what's the recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're trying to make it into the feed, as you said, it's you can't control getting into that video feed. It will only get picked up if it's vertical format, and you can kind of, if you cruise through it, you can sort of pick up on some of the patterns. Either you see folks doing the green screen background where whatever they have on screen is behind them, and they're sort of talking about what's above, or it is up close, and like I'll get super close to the camera, like they are this close, and they're walking around like doing something, or it's like at a desk shot, but it's very still close on the frame. So you'll kind of notice that a lot of it is sort of in your face content, if you will, where the camera is really close to the consumer, and those seem to get picked up a lot more than other formats. But again, it does have to be vertical in order to get picked up at all.
How is that new format going? What are people saying about? What are people at LinkedIn saying about?
Yeah, absolutely. We get pretty regular reports on consumption and scale, and it continues to grow. It's one of the fastest growing formats on the platform right now. As you can imagine, I mean, it's just what consumers are used to ingesting everywhere else, whether it's, Facebook Shorts, YouTube Shorts, TikTok. So it's just a consumption model that people find easy and convenient. And on LinkedIn, folks are there with a slightly different mindset. A lot of members come to the newsfeed to learn something, and a lot of members report that they feel positive when they leave LinkedIn because they've taken something away that they can use in their day-to-day or to improve their career. And in the video format, you get those, quick little bites and bits that you can use. Maybe you saw a quick tip on how to do a formula in Excel, or, just a career development tip that you can use in your next interview. So the short video format continues to ramp, and you're going to see a lot more of it here throughout this year in terms of functionality, features, and at some point, how to control getting into that feed, I have to imagine. But yeah, consumption has been on the rise.
Yeah, and given the uncertainty of being featured there, it's like, obviously everybody wants to go viral, but like it's tough, right? You cannot really control that, completely. So is it a fair, let's say, conclusion that companies should focus most of their time and budget on the regular feed, and especially in like ad formats, and then maybe throw one or two repurposed pieces there to see how they do, but not make it as like a core part of their strategy, or not put all of the chips there or most of the chips there?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think you can bank on getting in the video feed as a strategy right now. Again, like you said, there's no control over getting into that feed. Broadly speaking, if you're looking at a client acquisition strategy, what you see a lot of management teams and leadership teams doing now is they're hiring content specialists who write for their profiles. So you'll see a lot of these tech companies have writers that specialize in just writing posts for their CEO and creating content for individual contributors as a content plan outside of the blogs they're doing and the traditional media they're doing for the company as a whole. They're starting to formalize content production for leadership members, and being consistent with video and good quality content from an individual contributor standpoint is really important, and can still influence and win business at the end of the day. So I think it is important, especially going into 2025 here. Influencer-led inbound marketing is going to be a much bigger thing. It kind of already is on LinkedIn. You see your influencers in your feed regularly, and the folks that you look to for information or data on a certain topic. So becoming a thought leader in your space, whether you're the CEO or the VP or the director, is really important. And if you're a large organization trying to do that at scale, having multiple department heads or VPs be visible on the platform is a nice sort of casual introduction for users to you, your company, positioning you as a thought leader. And of course, you're talking about your products and services along the way. So really important for folks to kind of put that in their mind's eye, about just being consistent with posting throughout 2025 here.
Any advice on how to get your team to do that? Because easier said than done.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a time commitment, right? I mean, I know some folks who they don't pre-plan their posting. It's just 15 minutes in the morning, knock something out really quick. They're not putting a lot of time and effort into it, versus other folks have team members that are only dedicated to writing content for the CEO. So I think it depends on the level of resource that you have. If you can dedicate someone to getting to know the voice of your CEO and writing in their style, and coming up with an engaging content plan, that's helpful to get buy-in because it takes the workload off of that staff member. But in general, I think just collecting case studies from the ecosystem is really helpful too. There's a lot of folks out there putting out great content about their success with thought leader posting and how it leads to revenue. And it's sort of trying to be a thought leader on LinkedIn is like a savings account. Every time you make a post, it's like you depositing $1 into the bank, and you're building a little bit of interest at the time. So you're not going to get a viral post on week one, but if you're posting consistently 2 to 3 times a week throughout the year, you're going to have these posts that take off. Something's going to resonate, and interest starts to accrue over time as you're building your audience. So sort of think of thought leadership as a savings account for your business that's going to grow and help that brand in the long term.
One, and this is, I think I'm one of the few that are not a full believer. I still have a lot of doubts about case studies, and I understand, and have really no proof about it, but I don't know why I think they're overrated. But what's your take on case studies? I'm saying like they're too salesy, right? So a lot of time, like I hate to see a case study ad, right? Or people pushing case studies, but at the same time, I understand, and it's a best practice, and everybody talks about it, and everybody says, a lot of people say that they are the best performing content piece in order to, from bottom of the funnel standpoint. So like,
Mhm.
am I completely wrong?
Case studies, I think, are still really an important part of the ecosystem. Now, gated versus ungated, it just depends on your personal strategy. I see them used a lot in a gated format. And again, as long as it provides real value to the end consumer, I'm fine with a gated case study. So, for example, X company used your product and saw a 5x return on their investment,
Mhm.
or they became X times more efficient in their job by using your solution versus another, or they switched from your competitor to you. So if you're using them in a bottom of funnel space, I think they make a lot of sense. I do see them used in top of funnel or gated content to cold audiences. They can work there as well. But again, it just has to deliver real value to the consumer. If it's kind of a light case study that doesn't provide a lot of hard metrics, I think that's better served for ungated. But if you have something that's meaty and provides real substance, I think gating a
Mhm.
piece of, a case study is just fine.
Mhm. I guess, yeah, I guess, when there's value in understanding the how, right? It's like, okay, they switch from this other product to, or this company switched from this other product or agency to mine, and they got an X% increase in whatever. Okay, if you explain me how to do it, and that's something that I can use, even if I don't hire you, okay, I can definitely see the value there. I guess, that's those I can deal with.
Feels like
Um,
everyone's coming to LinkedIn to learn something. That's the
mhm,
core reason. And a little tidbit folks can use for their paid ads is that we see things like statistics or anything factual numbers based as our opening line in our ads. Those tend to get higher click-through rates than things that don't include a statistic or an
mhm,
interesting anecdote or fact. So that's something fun you can test in your paid media, as well as incorporating some of those stats into paid
yeah,
ads.
yeah. It's more than 80% from mobile these days, right?
Yeah, there's a heavy, and it's interesting how you split the data on mobile versus desktop, but a large amount of traffic is on mobile, as you can imagine. But if you're looking at like conversions and downloads or bottom of funnel
Mhm,
conversions, a lot of that's happening on desktop as well. As you can imagine, a lot of users on LinkedIn are at the desk during the day.
yeah.
So if someone's making a larger decision like booking a demo, or going through the company pricing page, often they're doing something like that on desktop. There's a similar trend like you can see in the B2C space when consumers are buying products, they will buy cheap products off their phone, $20 or less. But if you're trying to buy a mattress or a laptop or something expensive, they will often shift to desktop to finish that research and make the purchase. And you can sort of see a similar trend on LinkedIn as well. Easy, quick download of something or read a blog article, easy to do off your phone. But if you're trying to actually find a solution and you're comparing pricing and you're, maybe booking a demo, you're probably going to do a lot of that from the desktop.
Mhm.
So it depends on what stage of the funnel, but primarily, yes, a lot of traffic is on mobile these days.
Is that something that we should consider when managing and adjust and optimizing, or should we let the algorithm do that because obviously they quickly learn?
Sure, yeah, the algorithm is going to manage placement. You do have some options for mobile versus desktop preference in the targeting area, and I've seen some folks do some interesting targeting around that. But in general, mobile first creative is really important. So just making sure and testing your ads, and you can send little previews to yourself to look at them on your phone to make sure it stands out on a mobile device. Again, like that older, more horizontal placement, it's much smaller, more compressed. So on mobile, it doesn't show up as well. Like maybe the text that you have in there doesn't pop, or you have a preview of your PDF and you just can't see it. That's why the square formats that are a little larger show really nice on mobile, and why we typically recommend starting with like a square 1200 by 1200 pixel format. So yeah, anytime you're running landing pages or creating ad formats, mobile first is a good place to start, and it will show up just as well on desktop.
Mhm. Awesome. Um, Tanner, thank you. I was gonna ask you for, and we'll put. I know just for the listeners, Tanner puts a lot of these type of tips on his profile. So we'll include the link on the podcast page and the comments and LinkedIn and everything. Besides following you and looking at all your previous posts, where do you recommend people to go to learn and find the best practices, both from very basic to more advanced things, like any publisher, I mean, besides LinkedIn itself, right? But any other resource to be up to speed and managing LinkedIn ads as
Yeah,
best as possible?
absolutely. As you mentioned, I mean, of course, LinkedIn has a lot of its own resources around running advertisements. There's a lot of free stuff in the LinkedIn Learning coursework that you can interact with and learn from. So they have everything from intro to LinkedIn ads all the way up to like advanced attribution and measurement in LinkedIn Learning. So I always recommend starting there if you need base level best practices. And then once you're sort of beyond base level best practices, I turn heavily to my news feed to look at other folks in the space and see, what they're doing, what they're sharing. So as you come across influencers or regular content posters in your news feed, save them, follow them. That's one of my key resources because, these days you need to pull data from multiple sources to stay on top of what's working, what's not.
Yeah.
So the more folks you can follow and engage with and LinkedIn inside the news feed, I think the more up-to-date and real-time information you get on what's working versus what's not. So outside of like the formal resources, I definitely just encourage folks to dig through the LinkedIn
Mhm.
news feed and start picking up some tips and tricks there.
Yeah, maybe let's think in the LinkedIn, and we can start tagging a few of these thought leaders for LinkedIn, and we can tag them there, and people can follow them directly if they want to. Because a lot of times, the problem is that there are so many people that that are everyone's very opinionated on LinkedIn, but you never know, who you
Oh,
should be
sure.
trusting, So like a lot of times you don't have time to read 10, posts, so like it helps to have a curated list. So maybe we can channel that in the comments when we publish the episode.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to throw out some of my favorites into the show notes there for everybody. And to piggyback off your point about everyone having an opinion, the thing about marketing is there's a lot of ways to do it right. And, everyone seems to get siloed into either, gate everything, ungate everything, demand gen versus lead gen. And the truth of the situation is a blended model is always going to be best. So, depending on who you follow and what you listen to, you might find yourself getting siloed to, oh, I only want to do lead gen because it's trackable and I can't trust brand because I can't measure it. Or you're on the other end of the spectrum, all brand, no lead gen.
Yeah.
But I'd encourage folks to look at full funnel, have a nice blended model. And I think that's what we see folks have the most success with in the long
Yeah.
term.
And we talk, I mean, I think a lot of the questions we particularly refer to like mid-market companies, but not necessarily in the tech space, which I know is, the sector that you have worked or are working with the most, and it's also where we focus on as an agency, right? So any recommendations in terms of what tech services companies should be doing differently than other industries, or anything that particularly applies to them?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd say in 8 out of the 10 reports that I pull for clients when I'm looking at funnel mix and, sort of going back to this full funnel mindset, is that, 8 times out of 10, folks are heavily invested in lead gen bottom of funnel. And that leaves a lot of opportunity to sort of surpass your competitors in the content and branding space, because most folks aren't putting heavy investment into that 95% of the market that's not ready to buy right now. So I'd say when you're looking at your budgets for the year, your content plans for the year, start taking a long lens mindset when it comes to advertising on LinkedIn and plan to run for a year plus your content strategy in order to start seeing yields. Typically, we can see it takes 6 months to a year just for the brand to start sticking in somebody's mind, for them to start associating you with a solution if you're running good branding and content on top of your lead generation. So especially in the tech space, everyone wants demos, everybody wants trials, but that's the highest competition zone. So you definitely need to do it in terms for short-term wins, but focusing top of funnel, mid funnel is going to be your
Mhm.
biggest win for the long haul.
Mhm. Awesome. And I know, besides LinkedIn, you've worked in general in the B2B space, right? So I didn't want to end the podcast without asking you what other technologies, especially with powerful targeting capabilities, you have seen that work well, besides LinkedIn, and which ones don't? Because again, there are a lot of, just what I said about influencers applies to companies, obviously claiming that they have the best targeting, the best everything. So
Yeah, data is definitely an important one these days. Relying on fresh data is important, especially if you're doing ABM or outreach campaigns, like stuff outside of traditional paid media, or even just looking for lists to upload to your paid campaigns. One of the reasons LinkedIn is so great because you have like such good first party up-to-date data. Whereas when you're buying from data brokers like a ZoomInfo or Apollo, they try and refresh their data, but it's not as fast or as first
Mm-hmm.
party as LinkedIn is. So a lot of times you can end up buying old data. And usually we see firms that buy a list, they have to send it through a scrubbing service or a cleaning
Mm-hmm.
tool to make sure emails are good, valid, phone numbers are up to date, positions and titles are up to date. One of the cool tools that my prior team and a lot of teams are using now is Clay. I'm sure you've seen the name around the
Mm-hmm.
space. That is a
Mm-hmm.
wonderful tool for data enrichment in general. So if you are pulling lists or if you are trying to use third-party services, Clay will go out and look for the most up-to-date information for you and pull it in to make sure that your outreach and ABM teams are very successful. So I think that's a cool one to look into, especially if you are doing one-to-one or you have a sales team that's working leads. Fresh data is always really important. So of course, I'm going to be a proponent of LinkedIn as the first place for good first party data, but Clay's a pretty cool tool outside of that if you're not using it just yet.
And to target, for to leverage B2B targeting within perhaps the Google environment or the Meta environment, do you have any recommendations there?
It's hit or miss, I can say. I mean, as you sort of touched on at the top of the episode with Google, you can get close to folks with like list uploads and things like that, and retargeting of your Google Pixel. And then with Facebook, I can say they're trying. In my previous firm, we also ran a lot of Facebook ads as well, and Facebook started making some investments into the B2B data space, but with Facebook, someone can put their own title in. So instead of actually being a CEO of a company, they can just be CEO of my own life. And so
Uh-huh.
a lot of times when you are trying to target CEOs, you might get lower quality or irrelevant leads on Facebook because of that sort of formatting and option that they have. And that's why, typically on Facebook, you'll see cheaper lead costs. But when you do that math down funnel
Yeah.
of quality lead, you're actually probably paying more for a quality lead on Facebook than you are on LinkedIn. So Facebook does have some layers and some titles, and of course is a Goliath in the space for paid media, but it just really doesn't get much better in terms of
Yeah.
quality, when it comes to LinkedIn.
And I haven't changed my title in Facebook since I don't know how many years, for
Exactly.
more than 15.
Exactly.
Um, Tanner, anything else that I didn't get to ask that you think would be valuable
I
for
think we
to share?
covered a lot of good ground today. I think to summarize, a good full funnel strategy that's well balanced between the short and the long term. And to your point, thinking of LinkedIn as a different sport, it's a long game versus a short game. We can definitely generate some good quick wins, but I think the folks that win, especially in the enterprise space, are the ones that are there to play the long game.
Hmm. Awesome. Um, Thanks a lot, Tanner. This is a great episode. I'm sure a lot of people will take some action from it.
Absolutely. Well, if anyone listening has questions, feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn. Happy to chat anytime.
Thanks for listening to the Tailwind Marketing Podcast. If you enjoyed it, remember to subscribe for future episodes. Until next time.